is great to see you again, and I'm delighted to welcome you here to NATO headquarters.
Thank you.
The United Kingdom, as you know, has always been a staunch and essential ally. You are one of the founders of our great alliance. RAF pilots help secure Allied skies. The Royal Navy helps keep our seas safe. And the British Army contributes to our shared security. You are world-leading in cyber and innovation, and you make an invaluable contribution to our nuclear deterrent. The UK is also a firm friend to Ukraine. You have provided billions in military and humanitarian aid, vital training, and landmark security guarantees. Going forward, we must not only sustain, but continue to step up our support, so that when the time comes, Ukraine can sit at the negotiating table in a position of strength to pursue a good deal for lasting peace. Our world is increasingly more dangerous. We must be better equipped to meet any threat across all domains, both now and in the future. Russian destabilization campaigns in allied countries are on the rise. They have targeted digital infrastructure, British officials and even your National Health Service. Just last month, once again, you detected a Russian spy ship in British waters. And you made it clear to Moscow that such brazen acts were simply unacceptable. To stop these attacks once and for all, we need to up our game and make sure our deterrence leaves no room for doubt. We can do this by investing even more in defence. To put it in another way, to prevent war, we must spend more. The UK understands this instinctively. You have long met the 2% target, and I welcome plans to further increase investments in defence. Because in a more dangerous world, 2% will not be enough to keep us safe. We need to invest considerably more. We also need to replenish our stocks, and fast. There's no time to waste. Reviving our defence industries to ramp up defence production is an absolute must. During World War II, factories in the UK and the US produced billions of rounds of ammunition. That was before digitisation and automation. With all the might of British manufacturing, just imagine what we could achieve now. The challenges we face are complex, but together in NATO, there's nothing we cannot do. So thank you for your continued leadership and support of our transatlantic alliance. Prime Minister, dear Keir, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's very good to be here. I should say it's very good to be back here. And as you know, the UK's commitment to NATO is stronger than ever because the need for NATO is stronger than ever. And we've had a very good and productive discussion today on how we can meet the rising threats that Russia poses across our continent, including the situation, of course, in Ukraine. Now, a couple of weeks ago, as you know, I was in Kyiv. I saw residential buildings destroyed just days before. I met soldiers in the ICU recovering from really terrible burns. And I met children whose parents are out there now on the front line. And it's yet another reminder that this is a war not just in Ukraine, but a war on Ukraine against those children and their futures. And that's why together we stand with them. We are all working to end this war. But let's be absolutely clear. Peace will come through strength. And we must do all that we can to support Ukraine's defence. And that means stabilising the front line, providing the kit and training that they need. And that's why this year the UK will give more military support to Ukraine than ever before. We need to see all allies stepping up, particularly in Europe. President Trump has threatened more sanctions on Russia, and it's clear that that's got Putin rattled. We know that he's worried about the state of the Russian economy, so I'm here to work with our European partners on keeping up the pressure, targeting the energy revenues and the companies supplying his missile factories, to crush Putin's war machine. Because ultimately, alongside our military support, that is what will bring peace closer. And we must keep working together to bolster NATO. And as you say, things that would have provoked utter outrage just a few years ago have now become almost commonplace. Russian spy ships loitering off the British coast, a campaign of sabotage across Europe, cyber attacks, election interference and attempted assassinations. Russia is seeking to destabilise our continent and target our values. So we should still be outraged, and we must harden European defence. In the UK, we're proud to be a leading NATO ally, part of the forward land forces, helping to police our skies and patrol our seas. Our defence spending is, of course, 2.3% of GDP now, and we're working hard to set the path to 2.5. And NATO's plans and requirements, as well as the principle of NATO first, will be at the heart of our strategic defence review this year. Across Europe, we must shoulder more of the burden now, because it's our burden to carry. Now, that's what I'll be discussing at the EU Council this evening. We want to deliver an ambitious UK-EU security partnership to bolster NATO, covering military technology and R&D, improving the mobility of forces across Europe, protecting our critical infrastructure, and deepening our industrial collaboration to increase defence production. We can't be commentators when it comes to matters of peace on our continent. We must lead, and that's what I'm determined that we will do. Thank you so much, Mark.
So much to discuss. And let's get back to the studio now. I'm joined by the Labour MP for Pendle and Clitheroe, that's Jonathan Hinder, the journalist and broadcaster, the legend, Alistair Stewart. And I'm also joined by the director of the popular conservative movement, Popcons, Mark Littlewood. Huge amount to talk about there. But one thing that leapt out to me, Mark, it's all about the money. It really is all about the money. If they're talking about, Sir Keir Starmer said, we're working hard to set the path to 2.5%. At the same time, Donald Trump, I believe, by the way, the guy's not even in the room. It's the person dictating the march and the tattoo of this today. If Donald Trump says, actually, lads, it's 5%, this lot is it's just a talking shop.
Martin, you've nailed it right there. I mean, essentially, we heard from two very important and influential welfare recipients of American military aid. That's what we heard from. The USA is the vital cog in the wheel for NATO, and President Trump and I guess the American people are starting to run out of a bit of patience here. And Keir Starmer and Mark Rutte can talk about roadmaps and we're on a pathway to this. This is utterly ludicrous. This was essentially set up in the Cold War scenario, and I am unsurprised that Americans are saying we don't want to pay for this anymore. It is not really a geopolitical problem. It is principally a European security problem. And the Europeans, I'm afraid, have got too used to spending dollars and not enough sterling and not enough euros. And this is really going to change NATO. I think NATO is in danger. An institution that I love, actually. I think Western security is incredibly important. But I think it is unreasonable for us on this side of the pond to expect the Americans to pick up most of the tab.
And I wonder, Alistair Stewart, when you look at the numbers, the NATO funding numbers for last year, the primary donor, obviously, the United States of America, $875 billion. The UK second with a mere $80 billion, less than a tenth. Germany, 70 billion, France, 57 billion, Italy, 32 billion, a mere fraction, crumbs, compared to what America is putting in ostensibly for the defence of Europe. And I wonder how much the Prime Minister talking to Mark Rutte about we will build stronger relationships, actually matters. Do you feel that Donald Trump is going to look at this and think, do you know what? I'm sick and my taxpayers are sick of defending Europe. It's about time you lot coughed up.
Absolutely, and let us not forget for one moment the Trumpian slogans that got him re-elected with the majority in the Electoral College and of the popular vote, and that was "Make America Great Again." That takes money, dollars, cents, and America first. America first. So if you've got people who are wrestling at the moment, like the poor souls in California recovering from the fires, they want those dollars and cents before it goes into defending Europe. The only thing I would say in the smutty old world of politics is I actually, and it surprised me because I talked about Sir Keir's ineptitude at the very beginning of our conversation, and I think he's made that an art form in his premiership so far, ineptitude. I thought he handled that really rather well, because to avoid him and the United Kingdom becoming the next and immediate target of American trade wars, he was actually saying all the right things. He was even blowing air in Trump's direction about how great the United States had been in defending the Ukraine, and urging publicly all of his NATO European colleagues to stump up the cash. And did he have any choice? Yes. I mean, he could easily have got it wrong and put it wrong. And it was interesting to note the Secretary General of NATO had to correct himself. Not Sir Keir, 3 times.
Interesting. Jonathan Hinder, let's bring you in now. This is going to be some tightrope act, isn't it? Trying to keep Brussels happy, trying to keep Donald Trump happy, particularly, as we said earlier, Donald Trump has got his scope firmly set on Brussels in terms of trade tariffs, in terms of trade war, in terms of blowing NATO literally out of the water. If he asks for a 5% stump up, which he absolutely said he'd do all along, he could well do tomorrow. He might do it tonight. We've got the most unpredictable president in the history of the planet, and he's in no mood to negotiate. He seems like he's really going to play hardball. And I put it to you, is this a tightrope act that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, can keep going on? He can keep saying, it's important to have great relations with the EU and the US. But I thought the best question there was from a journalist who said, well, what would you do if America say you've got to choose a side?
Well, as you say, we've got unpredictable man in the White House at the moment, and it'll be a fool's game for me to try and predict what he's going to say next. What I would say on defence is that we are going to set out how we get to 2.5% of GDP in the spring. And let's remember how we got here. Highly respected Defence Secretary Ben Wallace described his own government, his own Conservative government, as having hollowed out our armed forces. We've got, on the other hand, Reform saying that they want to be best mates with Putin. So goodness knows where we'd be on defence if we had either of them.
I'm not sure that's a fair thing to say.
Well, you go and look at the record as to what he said in the past. So really, Labour is the party of defence now. We have said that we're going to get up to that.
So where are you going to move the money from to pay for more defence?
And Mark Rutte said that he wants to see more from the UK. The Prime Minister set out that he wants to see more.
So what are you going to cut to spend more on defence?
From our European allies. And that's what he's going to be talking about, as well as trade with the EU later.
But it is a fair question, Jonathan. I think a lot of people are going to be asking the same thing, and that is this. If we've got a £22 billion black hole now, what's that black hole going to look like when Trump drops the NATO bomb?
Well, as I say, we're going to set that out in the spring as to how we're going to get to 2.5%.
Why don't you set it out now?
Well, we've got to get in there, look at the books, and that's what we're doing.
You've had 6 months to look at the books.
Well, we're in the middle of a spending review, so I think it's legitimate.
2.5% of GDP you can calculate in 1 second. Why don't you commit that to defence?
We are committed to 2.5%.
You're committed.
Which
so
is
why
what's
don't we
going
do
to be
that
set
now?
out. That's what's going to be set out.
Well, it doesn't need to be set out. You can commit to that now.
Let's be clear
what are you going to cut in order to pay for
how
that?
we've got here, which is the previous
it's all the Tories' fault. But
I know you don't want to talk about that because obviously that
No, it's the Tories. The Tories were a disaster zone.
Well, I'm glad you say that.
But okay, how are you going to pay for it?
Gentlemen, that'll be a question for another time.
Given that there are going to be no more taxes anyway.
I suspect we won't get an answer today, but look, thank you very, very much for all of you coming in. Jonathan Hinder, excellent. Anna Stewart, always an absolute pleasure. And of course, Mark Littlewood, combative as ever. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Now, on a more